1039 LI News Radio presents People, Power, and Politics with Fred Towle.
Welcome to another episode of People, Power, and Politics. I'm your host, Fred Towle, and in the studio with us today is the new superintendent at the William Floyd School District, Kevin Koster. Kevin, welcome.
Hello. Thank you, Fred.
Appreciate you coming in and kind of giving us a little update about what's going on in your new position and what's going on in the William Floyd School District. Now, you're not new to William Floyd completely. You've been there for a while, right?
Yes, 13 years.
Oh, okay. Now, over the 13 years, you came here first as what, Kevin?
As an assistant.
A little,
I came as an assistant principal at John S. Hobart Elementary School. Shortly after that, I was promoted to principal, and then I came in to work with Dr. Cassiano, who retired June 30th, as part of his senior cabinet as an assistant superintendent.
Okay, and as an assistant superintendent, what were some of the things that you were working on in the district?
I had oversight over elementary programs, portions of special education, computer technology, and of course, our wonderful athletic department.
Now, before you came to William Floyd, had you worked in any of the other districts? Or
Yes, I was a fourth grade teacher in Longwood.
Okay. So, obviously, you started off your career planning on being a teacher, or did you think you were going to be an administrator, or what was the game plan there?
The game plan for me was to enjoy the wonderful experience I had at the Quorum Elementary School with some truly special educators, some wonderful leadership there, great colleagues, and I just kept finding myself taking on roles or being tapped to take on roles within the building that put me in leadership positions. And that's when I decided to pursue, after my master's, I decided to pursue attaining a certificate through Stony Brook, which would give me options down the line should I decide to, participate in and actually trying to attain an administrative position in a school district.
Yeah, I imagine it must be much more complicated per se as an administrator than just being a teacher. You know, your goal is to deal with those whatever number of students are assigned to you in a given week, and that's your focus. As an administrator, you have so many other responsibilities. You need to deal with the unions, you need to deal with students, you need to deal with issues within the district, the community. I mean, it's really a completely different almost track, I would think.
It is different, but I will tell you, Fred, one of the most stressful times of my life was that September when I was first, appointed a fourth grade teacher, and the children came into the classroom, and it was the first day of school. And after my spiel of about an hour, I realized that I was responsible for providing not only academic instruction in literacy, language arts, mathematics, science, social studies, health. I was also responsible for socially educating the students. And as a 23-year-old, that was definitely a very wonderful learning experience, but one that kept me up many, many nights.
Yeah, there's no question that, teachers have such an impact in students' lives, even much later into life. I think about all the teachers that I had when I went into William Floyd, some of which I still see now and are involved in the community and have since retired, a couple that are still teaching, amazingly enough, considering how old I am. But, really that impact is, something that lasts, for a lifetime. And it's an awesome responsibility. You're probably right. That's probably a little tougher than dealing with the rest of the stuff, when it's all said and done.
Well, I come from a family of educators. Both my parents were teachers. My wife is a teacher. Several of my siblings are teachers. I have a brother going back to school to be a teacher. So, discussions about education, and not exactly always instruction, but discussions around the table about how to be that positive, significant influence, that great coach, that facilitator of excitement in the classroom was something that my parents and my siblings spoke about and still speak about very, very often.
You're listening to People, Power, and Politics. I'm your host, Fred Towle, and with us is the new superintendent at the William Floyd School District. Kevin, obviously, you've taken on a much more front row position now in being the superintendent of schools. The buck basically stops with you, and you're responsible pretty much for everything, regardless of whether you handled it or were involved in it. What do you see as some of your goals, some of the things you want to change, and what are you thinking as far as issues you want to deal with as the new superintendent?
Well, the first thing starts with building a highly competent, intelligent, and humanistic leadership team. meaning that we are a very large district, as you know, approximately 8,900 students, 8 buildings. Our high school we we'll refer to sometimes as the small city, and it really starts with setting the tone with leadership. I don't need university professor type leaders that can recite back textbook and verse. I need people that can influence and inspire our teachers. And then on the administrative ranks, our building level administrators, assistant principals and principals, to want to take that risk and to want to push their buildings, both academically and socially to the next level.
Approximately how many people you have working for you in the district, and what's your budget?
Our budget is approximately $225 million, and we have over 1,000 employees and approximately 630 teachers.
Okay, so you're dealing with, out of the 1,600 are teachers?
Yes.
Okay, so you're dealing basically, as you said, with 8,500 students and 1,000 employees. You're not kidding when you talk about a city. Mm-hmm. I mean, your budget, although enormous, obviously you're in a very low property wealth district. There's a lot of residential homes. It's not a commercial district. So obviously the bulk of that burden, whether state aid or property taxes, comes from the residents. That's a very well-developed community as far as residents are concerned. Now, the district includes what communities for our listeners who don't know?
Well, we call it the Tri-Hamlet area. So you have Shirley, Mastic, and Mastic Beach.
Okay, and then some in Mauritius too, right?
Yep, some in Mauritius as well.
Okay, that's good. Now, how are you seeing, let's get right into the budget for a second. How are you seeing the finances? Obviously, we've read in the paper in the last couple of days that the governor's proposed about giving more aid to school districts. Long Island seems to always get the short end of the stick, thanks to Albany. Our senators, the 9 from Long Island, and obviously our assembly people fight like hell to make sure the school districts here get, the most amount of money possible. But obviously, the Democrats control the assembly in Albany, and many of them are from Manhattan, and the funding, obviously, in the city is different. How do you see the budget that was adopted, and what are you thinking on the governor's proposal, I guess, for new money?
Well, we're always thankful when we see an increase in state aid. Obviously the governor makes his State of the State address, and then as you mentioned, our local assemblymen, go into trying to then make the budget more clear and more finite. A lot of what happens with proposals and increases in state aid depend on how the government officials allow us to utilize the funds. In other words, what basket it goes into. There are some pretty restrictive lines that go into the funding. In other words, you may be looking at an increase in, say, $2 million in state aid, but how much of it is directly dedicated to universal pre-K, which can only be spent then on universal pre-K, or in a transportation line item, which then again can only be used, for transportation. What we benefit most from is when we have the ability to utilize the funds in areas that are crucially important to keeping our academics, at a top level. So, it's always a very interesting time of year. We have some upcoming, legislative breakfasts at Longwood, which we'll hear from our government officials and what's going on directly from Albany. We have the Suffolk County School Superintendent's, BOCES breakfast and forum, coming up. Both of those are on Saturdays later in the month and in early February. And at that point, we hope to get a more detailed picture of exactly what is going to come to the districts, and specifically for us, obviously, what's going to come into the William Floyd School District.
You're listening to People, Power, and Politics. I'm your host, Fred Towle, and again with us in the studio is Kevin, the new superintendent at the William Floyd School District. Kevin, obviously, as I mentioned, William Floyd being a low-wealth property district, not a low-wealth community, has a lot of rich history. Obviously, school district is named after William Floyd, one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. A lot of hardworking, middle-class people in that community, many of which have, obviously, children. I think there's like 70,000 people that live in Mastic, Shirley, Mastic Beach, and or Mauritius. So, almost 10% of that population is the children going to the school district. I'm sure that number continues to rise. The district is not losing kids, it's gaining kids. Your expenses continue to go up. and now you're battling, the governor's 2% cap, that you can't pierce that cap. They seem to continue to put restrictions and mandates on you, but then don't provide the support to help you obtain or reach those goals, particularly when they're saying, hey, here's $2 million in state aid, but you can only use it for landscaping, or you can only use it for transportation, and you don't need it for transportation. You need it for infrastructure or building repair or training or security or what have you. I mean, how do you try to make that work? I mean, I don't think the general public has any, they think you're in charge of programs and the teachers and everything going on in the district, but you and your cabinet or staff are the folks that help put that budget together for the school board. And obviously there's a citizen body that governs the school district, but you're handling, making sure the trains run on time. How do you combat, those issues?
It really comes down to what is the priority. What is the need of the building, whether it be at the high school or our 2 middle schools, William Paco, William Floyd Middle, or any of our 5 elementary schools. Whether it is an academic need, a need for intervention services to provide assistance for students that may enter and may be struggling with their literacy levels or mathematics, or the mental health need. Last year we made a very aggressive move in hiring several social workers, a transition coordinator, a psychologist specifically dedicated toward working with our freshman population, so that we were able to meet the social and emotional needs of our students. That being one of the main priorities. We're of the belief that if our children and our students and our young adults feel comfortable and we're assisting them, socially and emotionally, that they'll be able to be successful academically. So it really comes down to what is the priority. You have your mandates. You are correct. Some of them are unfunded. They come down from the commissioner. Commissioner's regulations in schools are the same thing as following law. And you really have to take a look at not only what do you need for this year, but our assistant superintendent for business and our board of education are very, very, very good at looking at a 3-year plan, a 5-year plan, a 7-year plan. So we're adding these programs back, and we have to make sure that we're able to sustain them. That would be the priority. If state aid continues to be, increasing, that would be the goal, to make sure that we are able to maintain program.
Now, obviously, over the last couple of years, there have been an enormous number of adjustments, changes, additions, deletions. I mean, one of the things that come to mind is that I guess the school district, I remember during my day, like I said, back in the Stone Age, that they used to have that cooperative agreement with BOCES, and they'd send you over for photography or cosmetology or auto mechanics repairs. Now, I understand you guys have ceased that relationship and are doing a lot of those programs in-house.
Yes.
Why don't we talk a little bit about that for our listeners who may not be aware of that?
Sure. Through the vision of the Board of Education and the former superintendent, Dr. Cassiano, we were able to build onto the high school a new wing that we would call the Career Technical Education or CTE wing, in which we brought in what we refer to as academies. We have an auto mechanics shop and classroom space in the high school where the students receive instruction both in a traditional format and then actually in a mechanic shop, in which we're housing several cars, and they receive training with the hope that they can graduate with a certificate that would make them more employable. We have a medical assisting program where we actually have a classroom, a double classroom actually, divided into what would appear to be either a doctor's office or an emergency room type setup, and then another half for classroom lecture, where the students are learning crucially important and employable skills in that field. We have cosmetology, which, as you know, is a highly employable skill immediately upon graduation from high school, in which the students are actually working, with a licensed beautician and learning the trades of cosmetology. We have a culinary institute, which is actually a working commercial kitchen and lecture center, in which one of our teachers, who is actually a world-ranked ice carver and a chef, is actually preparing preparing the students for all aspects of the Culinary Institute. So we are. And we also, of course, have our state-recognized and award-winning business academy, in which we are, extremely proud of the product that is coming out of that particular academy. Top flight educators that are really making an impact and giving our students employable skills. One of the things that we've really focused on is putting the best teachers in front of our students. The teachers that are obviously, highly committed, but bring something special to the classroom. And when we talk about these programs, such as auto mechanics or carpentry, which I did not mention earlier, or or culinary, you're talking about putting impact type teachers in front of our students on a daily basis and giving them the employable skills that could lead them to either go to school for any of these skills at a secondary level or make them employable upon graduation.
There's no question that programs have a major impact. I can speak, I guess, from firsthand knowledge. My son Matthew is in the culinary program. I just got done buying my 60 pies for Christmas. I think I still have a couple of those pies and cookies left, so I should have brought a couple into the studio for you. But they were absolutely great. They did that as part of their fundraising program to try to do their trip to Florida, I guess, this year. The program has had such an impact in his life, I can see as a parent. He fought with my mother-in-law during Christmas to cook Christmas dinner. He was telling her she was doing it wrong. Those two fought in the kitchen and I hid in the living room. But it really has had an impact on him and his interest in food preparation and how the service is done. And of course, he's thinking about getting into, hotel management or hospitality management. So that connection or that program really is a big help in helping him decide, at 16 what his future is going to potentially be. We go out to restaurants now and he comments about things and what they should or should not have done. So clearly the teacher's having a big impact. So is the program. What made you guys think of doing it yourself as opposed to continuing the relationship with BOCES? Was it financial, where now the school district keeps all the aid and you're training the kids, or, what was the brainstorm behind that? I think it's a great idea. I'm just curious.
Back when the recession in the country and obviously in the state was at its height, we were unable to send the number of students that wanted these type of skills to BOCES due to budget constraints. BOCES runs a fine program. But
it's not cheap.
But we were, when the state aid was flat or even reduced, then we were looking at cutting our rollover budget from into the next year. So in other words, actually having to remove program from the existing budget, that became a casualty. And I will tell you that left a hole for many of our students. And through effective strategic planning and discussion and support, we were able to make the necessary adjustments so that we could start our own program. It also gave us the ability to supervise our own program. Supervision of instruction, supervision of program is something that is crucially important to make sure that our students are getting the most effective and meaningful education possible. And we really didn't have that internal control when we were sending our students out. It also impacted the students' schedule because they would have to be transported from the William Floyd High School to BOCES, or from BOCES to the William Floyd High School, depending on their arrangement.
It's a good hour wasted of the day, yeah.
And this is a walk down the hallway.
Yeah, literally.
It's amazing to watch the auto mechanics students, basically walk in, put their safety goggles on, and pick up where they left off the day before that. We also added an academic component of traditional sense to each of our career academies, where the students are still receiving instruction in core areas throughout the course of their CTE experience.
Yeah, I know my son has really done a lot of focusing more so on math and writing, and he was very curious as what did that have to do with anything? But everything you cook with has some type of measurement or not, so that was obvious. How many kids do you think are involved in all of the programs that you're running now in that specialized programming?
I would have to estimate that we have probably approximately 200 students involved in the program, juniors and seniors.
Right, so it's basically 11th and 12th grade, so 16, 17 in range age, I guess?
Yeah, a little, depending on the program, we're seeing a little more. Like, for example, you have a large number of students in our business academies. You have, a growing number of students in our culinary academy. Medical assisting actually had a waiting list this year. The word is catching on, and whether, I was actually speaking, we had our recruiting fair this week in the high school in front of one of our gyms for CTE. I was actually speaking to one of the, the young ladies who's involved in the medical assisting program, and she was basically had mapped out her plan for her to become a registered nurse, and was explaining, all of the functions of a nurse to me that, she had learned through this program, and, how it really inspired her and gave her a clear course of action. It was quite a wonderful discussion.
Yeah, it's definitely a moving program, and it's, as I said, as a parent just watching my son, I can see that it's clearly having a positive impact on him. Hopefully, if he decides that's his career path, that he'll have built a strong foundation. And the other benefit is if he decides that's not his career path, then he found that out now, as opposed to going, to culinary college for 4 years and, spending a ton of money and then deciding he doesn't want to do that. Amazingly enough, we're almost at our break. Again, this is People, Power, and Politics. I'm your host, Fred Towle, and we have with us today in the studio the new superintendent at William Floyd School District, Kevin Coster. Kevin, when we come back from the break, we'll talk about Common Core and some of the other issues going on in the district.
1039 LI News Radio presents People, Power, and Politics with Fred Towle.
Welcome to another episode of People, Power, and Politics. I'm your host, and again in the studio with us is the new superintendent at William Floyd Schools District, Kevin Coster. Obviously, Kevin's not that new to the school district. As he mentioned, he's been around for 14 years, but new to the position since Dr. Paul Casciano retired. Just before we took the break, we were talking about, I guess, the biggest elephant in the room when it comes to school districts, and that's Common Core. Obviously, the governor and elected officials in the state are announcing, changes as we speak and reducing some of those restrictions. How are you faring with the Common Core, and what are your thoughts, Kevin?
Well, what the Common Core did was provide a rigorous outline for instruction in the area of English language arts and mathematics. And what it also did was it became a cross-curricular approach by combining traditional social studies or history in with English language arts and learning in the content area. The mathematics definitely became much more complex, kind of set a solid foundation for what the students would encounter when they were attending courses in algebra and geometry and things along that line. And we've seen some benefits in the rigors of the instruction in the classroom. Obviously, the Common Core was rolled out the same time that the New York State assessments were changed. They became Common Core assessments. They became more lengthy, in the amount of time that they behind the design, and the scaling of the assessments was also changed, which caused a lot of controversy. And one of the great quotes that I've heard about how the entire Common Core and the change in the assessments and teacher evaluations was rolled out was that it was an attempt to build the plane while it was flying in the sky. And
that would be an accurate description. That sounds like state government. Yeah.
There are a lot of rich and rigorous parts of the Common Core which I think have had a positive impact. But like any curriculum, they're not ideal. We had to try our best to make it a William Floyd Common Core curriculum for what worked for our specific students and our teachers. I think perhaps if the teacher evaluation as well as the state assessments weren't changed so drastically and tied into Common Core, that we may have had some more time to really get wrap our fingers around it, wrap our heads around it, and kind of pilot it and figure out what worked and what didn't work. But as I indicated earlier, there were so many things that were placed on our plates at such an expedient time period, it did not provide us with that opportunity.
It seems to me that the concept of wanting to make sure our kids have the most tools, most information, best resources possible is a goal that every parent, every educator, every administrator, every citizen would want. I'm sure the students don't want it at the moment in time. They don't want any more work. But all of us, the adults who are supposed to be establishing this, I'm sure would support such a thing. What seems odd to me is that when I was a student, I recall having a tutor. My parents paid for a tutor and helped me out in a couple of the subjects that I was struggling in. William Floyd was an incredible school district, still is. I'm extremely supportive of that. I'm very happy that my son is able to go to that school district. But I have a tutor every day at my house to make sure that my kid is able to deal with the pressures that are being, placed on him, obviously by people from Albany who are establishing criterias. And to do that on kids who are 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 years old, who are on the tail end of their, preliminary educational field, seemed to me to be odd. Why not start it at kindergarten so that by the time that child got to high school, the standards had completely changed? Why try to start something in the middle of the game? It just seems so unfair to me. And I recall the pressure of, testing and work and studying, but I don't ever recall it being as bad as it is on my kid now. And I just feel awful every time I see him. And my son is a 90-plus student. It's not that he's a bad student. It's just that you're getting up at, he's leaving my house at 6. He goes to work before I do. At 6:40 in the morning. He spends, whatever time it is on the bus to get to school. He gets to school. He comes home at 2:30. At 3 o'clock, the tutor shows up. At 5 o'clock, the tutor leaves. He has some quick dinner, and at 6 o'clock, he's on his way to Key Club. And at 7:30, he's on his way to Boy Scouts. And then he gets home at 9 o'clock to finish up whatever homework he didn't finish up with the tutor. So he's starting a 7 to 10 hour day, 7 in the morning to 10 o'clock at night. Yeah, this doesn't seem to be the best way to want to teach our kids and get them involved in the community and have them participate in extracurricular activities that also make them a good citizen. I mean, I don't know what the state's thinking. And I think that's one of the things that, sparked such outrage about, you're going to do it this way, period, end of story. As far as the students go.
Yeah, I think one of your points that you just made hit the nail on the head. I don't think you'll find many educators or informed individuals that would debate the success of the rollout of the Common Core. You are correct. It was, I would say, a hasty implementation. And I do agree that if you started on the primary level and you introduced it in a fashion that let people become comfortable with it, we had the material ahead of time. One of the things that was always extremely helpful when I was a principal, assistant principal, and a teacher, is there was no mystery with the state education department as far as what they were going to assess. You would get a subject area, for example, literacy. You would know that there would be inferential thinking questions or reading between the line type questions that you would have to teach the kids to think about things that were not literal in the text. There would be vocabulary-based questions. In math, you knew there was going to be computation, problem-solving type skills, and computation, would be obviously something that you would have to make sure you addressed. When the Common Core and the state assessments were changed several years back, a lot of that became a mystery to the districts, and we were unable to adequately in an informed manner prepare our students. If it would have started in kindergarten, first and second grade, and then rolled its way up, over the course of several years, I think we would have had more success with getting buy-in and implementation. Also the changing of the scaling of the state assessments caused a lot of controversy. You had students the year prior, if they were in fifth grade taking an assessment and they may have been a 4, and they got the exact same number of questions right the following year on this new state assessments, and they wound up at a high 2. sending that message in such a short time period without a valid explanation is going to cause parents to be very concerned, educators to be very concerned, and then linking that directly to a teacher evaluation in the form of a growth score without proper explanation also caused a lot of concern for people that were at one time viewed as teachers that exceeded standards or very much easily met standards, and now they were deemed as potentially borderline developing. So there was a lot of controversy around the rollout. You are correct.
Yeah, it just seems, as I said, to not have been well thought out and planned. And of course, former Commissioner King is now the Secretary of Education for the federal government. So that, of course, makes me feel very warm and fuzzy that the guy that rolled out Common Core is now in charge of the federal level of things. But having said that, I mean, obviously there were two components of the Common Core. First being that of, the changing of curriculum and studying and requirements and grading and testing and scoring. And then the second component was the evaluation of teachers. And quite honestly, I mean, there was a system in place to do that. People that work in a school district, I think it's 6 years before you're tenured, if that's not correct, right? 3 or 4? Okay, so 4 years, that you have a chance to evaluate that person to see what they did as a good or a bad job. Obviously, there is no shortage of people being interested in being a teacher, but I can't, all these years later, remember a bad teacher that I had. That takes a calling. It's something you must want to do. You're not doing it clearly for the money. Although if you're in the system for a long period of time, you make a very good salary. There's nothing bad, and benefits, pension, retirement system, all things that are reasonable for what you're doing and the responsibility that you have. But it's, obviously in every profession there are people that are better and worse. But, to me, that evaluation really was more towards the horror stories that you hear in the city, where they have teachers that are horrible and have done a terrible job, and they're still unfortunately paying them $150,000 a year to sit in the hall and to do, hall monitoring because they can't get rid of the teachers. I don't think we have that kind of problem here on Long Island.
No, and I will tell you, being a father of an 8th grade student, a 5th grader, and a kindergartner, it's quite simple. I've always approached this job, whatever capacity I've been in, being that I would not ask any of our teachers to do in the William Floyd School District what I wouldn't expect from my own children to receive from their teachers. And if you can, kind of keep yourself grounded and realize that my children deserve the same as the students in William Floyd from their teachers, from their principals, from their, whoever interacts with them on a daily basis, it can really keep you very focused on the importance of supervision of instruction. As being a William Floyd alumni, and in my time in William Floyd, the Floyd teachers, social workers, psychologists, coaches, principals, assistant principals, whatever capacity, have always stepped up to the challenge. They've always stepped up to the challenge, regardless of the leadership that's been in place. The teachers and the people that are on the front lines every day for our students have really gone above and beyond. I walk up and down the hallways of our high school on a daily basis. I see great interaction. I see great things going on in the classrooms, great interaction with the administrators, and there's a lot of talent out there. And
your teachers, which is amazing that a union would actually offer to do this, gave givebacks to help the district deal with some of its financial problems over the last couple of years. I guess under the leadership of Ron Gross, who's also a William Floyd graduate, graduated the same year that I did, and I won't say when. I don't want to offend Ronnie or myself, but I think that's just an incredible thing for a union to step up. And many of the teachers, some live in the district, but some don't. So to give that back, to put those things on the table to help deal with your budget, talks about their love of their job and the students and the community.
It starts with, as you know, an extremely intelligent, extremely active Board of Education, a very stable Board of Education with President Bob Vecchio and Jean Ann Dawson. And then it trickles down. It trickles down from the leadership and district office, having a the teacher union president, President Gross, and I may not always agree on everything, but there's an element of respect, and we want to be fair and reasonable with the people that we're dealing with. The teachers are the ones in front of our classroom on a daily basis. They're the ones meeting and dealing and stewarding and educating our students. They're the front line. Yeah. Well said. And having a collegial relationship, a positive relationship, and a professional relationship is definitely key. Like I said, we're not always going to agree on everything, but there's always an element of respect. And I think that has been the case with district office leadership for many, many, many years. But we are, we are very, very fortunate that our teachers were willing to do certain revisions to their contract, whether it was a give back or whether it was changing to, not a straight raise every year, moving into something called revenue-driven language, which, depending on the amount of state aid that we get in or revenue we get in, drives their raises. That's actually in all of our bargaining units now. Administrators, TA, paraprofessionals, heads and chief custodians, we've really moved in that direction, to try to sustain. And it does us no good if we get a program in place for 2 years that's paying immediate dividends and then we can't sustain because we've made promises down the line that we can't keep financially.
Obviously, Kevin, the William Floyd School District has many things to be proud of, which we're going to get into those in a second. I mean, I know you've recently received a lot of awards and some accolades for a lot of the students, but Newsday had printed a piece the other day, I guess, so they did some graphs and charts and talked about percentage of kids graduating, percentage of kids going to college. How accurate is that information? I mean, what is really going on? Well,
we measure our graduation rate twice during the year. We have our June graduates, and then we have our August summer school graduates. There was a time when the William Floyd School District had a 61% graduation rate. That would be the graduating cohort for students that entered in 9th grade and graduated on time, either in June or in August. So we peaked at 83% at one point, under the former superintendent, Dr. Cassiano, and our actual graduation number with summer school was a little bit closer to 80 than what was printed in Newsday. What we're trying to do is to find our at-risk students early on in their freshman year. And set them up with, a pathway to succeed. Some students are non-traditional learners, so we've tried to find some non-traditional ways for them to accumulate the necessary credits and to pass their regencies. And that comes with excellent support from, our guidance department, as well as the social workers that I had mentioned earlier, and teachers that are heavily invested in student success. It could be an athletic coach that is, making sure that all of his students are academically eligible and are attending necessary study halls and extra help session. It could be a teacher. It could be an administrator. We had one of our administrators and a teacher take a senior under their belts last year that absolutely wouldn't have graduated if they didn't mentor him. And he walked across stage in June and earned his high school diploma. He was one of our auto mechanic students in our CTE program. We're all in this together in William Floyd. And the old cliche that it takes a village. Well, it absolutely takes a village when you have 2,800 students. Some come with challenges, and some come and are ready to excel. As you know, one of our valedictorian is attending MIT. Our valedictorian last year, she's now at MIT. So we really do have a tremendous diversity in opportunity and ability level, and it's our job to make sure that we're meeting their needs.
You recently have been recognized for some other state awards. I think you had an Intel winner, if I'm not mistaken. What are some of the things happening? I mean, the NJORTC, I heard, received some awards, and you've had some music accomplishments.
Well, I'll start with our first ever Intel semifinalist, one of only 300 semifinalists from across the nation. Her name is Shannon Beatty. She's a senior at William Floyd High School. She comes from a long line of Beattys, highly successful students throughout the course of their career here academically in William Floyd, and she is the youngest. I had the opportunity to call Mr. Beatty and congratulate him upon hearing the award and that his daughter received. And he was very complimentary as to the opportunities that his children have received in the William Floyd School District. This is a wonderful accomplishment. 3.5 years ago, we started a science research program. We hired a director of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and a science research teacher. And Shannon has benefited from some wonderful mentoring from them, as well as one of our middle school teachers who's a geologist, and she has networked with the Brookhaven National Lab and a professor from the University of Chicago, and really has helped once again to put William Floyd on the map, for another subject being science research. We're extremely proud of her, and we're anxiously awaiting to find out if she'll be one of 40 finalists across the entire United States.
Okay. You're listening to People, Power, and Politics. I'm your host, Fred Towle, and in the studio with us again is the new superintendent at the William Floyd School District, Kevin Koster. Kevin, in our last couple minutes, why don't we talk about some of your goals and objectives as we move into 2016 and how maybe the community and listeners can help the school district and students?
Well, it starts with obviously continuing to build a solid foundation, for our elementary students, making sure that they are, accomplishing the necessary gains in literacy and mathematics, and providing our elementary buildings with, the necessary support so they can succeed. We're looking into increasing our reading in the content areas in the middle school and supporting more academic enrichment there. We have two very, very strong middle school principals, which we're very proud of, and we're looking forward to continuing our gains there. At the high school level, it really starts with making sure that our freshmen coming out of the gate are able to gain the necessary credits that they need, both in the classroom and with the Regents assessments, and then helping to find their interest and setting them off in the right direction. Whether it be their search for a 4-year college or university, or their search into our college CTE program, career technical program, and we're really actually looking to continue to expand on our CTE programs, perhaps venturing into architecture or computer science or some other areas that really need our students to attain the necessary support. We also want to continue with our wonderful accomplishments in our fine arts program and our athletic program, which was ranked in the top 100 in New York State, which we're extremely proud of. Listen, we have our challenges, but we have the right faculty, staff, and leadership in place in William Floyd to reach these challenges on a daily basis.
Well, I can't believe it, the time is up. We really appreciate you coming in and giving us, a firsthand perspective and update. We will definitely have you back over the next couple months so you can keep us posted. And again, good luck, Kevin. We appreciate you coming in.
Thank you very much, Fred.